right now. The session today, I thought about breaking it into two distinctive parts. First, we're going to go through a series of slides in which we are going to define some of the challenges that we will find when trying to automate the analysis of NMR screening results. Some of these challenges can be easily prevented if we plan ahead when we are preparing our screening campaigns or when we are preparing our screening sets. So this is the reason why I wanted to make this bit of introduction, why I'm going to be mentioning certain aspects that maybe you wouldn't think they would be on a practical session, but I thought it would be required in order to avoid problems for you later on when you come to the point of wanting to automate your analysis, because you don't want to spend hundreds of hours in front of the computer screen looking at NMR peaks, but you would like to make that process as painless as possible. Okay, once we finish this, we will jump into the software. We'll see the software in action, and we will go through other specific types of actions that we will have to take in order to automate the screening as much as possible. Okay, so the layout for today's webinar is going to be the following. We are going to go very quickly through some generic concepts. We are going to try to make the case for automation. Very briefly, we'll go through creation of pools, the fragment selection and preparation, and checking the integrity and identity of our compounds. We are going as well to check and look to certain acquisition considerations. What should we do in terms of reprocessing? When I was drafting the presentation, and I was tempted to exclude the last bit because it may get a little bit philosophical, but I'm going to avoid any kind of non-practical discussion in that sense, and I'm going to be 100% pragmatic. And last but not least, we'll go into the full-on analysis and into seeing the software in action. Okay, so there is one thing after working for so many years with the screening community that, believe me, there are standards on the field. It's something that most people tend to start very quickly from a few papers that they've read of conferences that they have assisted, but there are very, very nice guides out there that can help you set all this. We will refer to, in particular, this paper from Natural Protocols later on, but also from one of the papers from 2004 from Chemical Reviews. Just to tell you and to let you know that there are things to help you start setting up your screen, and that will later help on to make your process as automatic as possible, from acquisition all the way to the bit that concerns interpretation of results. And also, I'll mention this later on. Please bear in mind when you are starting this. I know that for some of you who are already here and are very experienced, this is something pretty obvious, but for some people it's not. Every target is different, and what we are going to be considering results, acceptable results for one target, it will not be for another target, or call it protein. Okay, very quickly in the terms of as well papers, in science for me is almost sometimes as important to know what to do, but also to know what not to do. And in this sense, there is not very often that we get papers in this nature, and I always like to bring this to the attention of people. This is a fantastic paper by Ben Davis and Daniel Erson. It will help you a lot, from all the way from thinking about your screen to all the way to looking at your results in the correct way. I thought I should mention this. Okay. Most of you will be familiar. This is a very test-heavy slide, but I just wanted to kind of put things into perspective of what you will be able to do with the software at this level. You will be able to analyze and reprocess data from all kinds of experiments, most common ones, STD or relaxation editing experiments, and or water-lopsy, and any combination of those. One thing that we've been looking into lately has been into looking at 2D data. In that sense, we have started giving our first steps. We have start giving those first steps by binning 2D data in a very effective manner. That will help you in other type of experiments. But I thought this should be mentioned at this point. Obviously, one thing that we are going to be seeing, and many of you may have already experienced, I imagine, is that the analysis can become a bottleneck at some point. If you are in a full campaign, you may be spending more time than you would wish in front of your computer looking at hundreds, if not thousands, of NMR peaks. So why would we want to automate? Well, the first obvious answer is to avoid human error. Humans are fantastic. Usually the first 45 minutes they're looking at screening results. After 2 hours, well, things don't end. Everything either looks a hit or everything looks like it could be a hit. Also, using automatic tools is very quick. It's very easy to quantitate your results. It's objective. Computers are not biased, and it's going to save you a lot of time. So in terms of time, there is one thing that I think most people will be in this region. This is a representation that I kind of came out with of what a setup for screening can take you once you know, obviously, very well what you would like to do. And interpretation of results, it always takes a hit. And interpretation of results is sometimes, it may take as long as any of the other 2 steps. So I always thought that it would be natural to try to decrease the interpretation of results as much as possible given today's state-of-the-art technology. So starting now, getting our hands more into the matter, one of the first questions when you are starting or thinking about designing a campaign always is the creation of the pools, the creation of the mixtures. There are many papers out there. We personally have experimented with quite a few of them, and to be absolutely honest, this is one of the cases that brute force works, and it works very well. In the case of the creation of mixtures, we have designed a tool in which what we are doing is very briefly, we are looking at all your original spectra for each one of the individual fragments. We will process this in a certain manner. We will establish both how many compounds you would like per mixture, and also which is the maximum overlap that you feel comfortable with. And also very important, which regions are the ones that interest you the most. Depending on the nature of your fragment set, this may be more or less relevant. But certainly up to a point is relevant, because there are regions that you will most certainly than not you would like to avoid, like your solvent regions, like your buffer regions. Okay, like I was saying, once we move and we have a clear idea about what you would like to have, or how many compounds you would like to have per screening pool, there are experimental conditions that will help you later on with the analysis. The first of them, and always is possible, if you have a reference when you are going to perform the automation, your analysis, or even if you are looking at it on a sample-by-sample basis, having a reference in there is going to help you for many different reasons. The main reason is going to be that it's going to give you good alignment conditions. If you have good alignment conditions, the first thing, or the first benefit that you are going to have is that it's going to be very easy to normalize your peaks, and hence it's going to be very easy to quantitate your results. Also, look at, I'm not going to go through obviously all the full experimental setup, mainly because most of you will know about that. So you guys can very effectively know and plan for your solvent pH conditions, saline power, etc., etc. Now, there is one point that must be raised in here, and is that for fluorine 19 type of experiments, this is not going to be as easy, having a reference in there. It's not incredibly difficult, but it's not going to be that easy. But if we are thinking of tackling the alignment problem, well, there are different strategies. We'll see later more about this on the practical session and what has been our solution for it. I will just advance that we played with global alignment, and we checked that that was the best approach to use for fluorine cases. Okay, so in that sense, what we want to achieve is getting from a starting situation like this, and many of you will have a spectra like this. We are looking at our TSP region in this particular scenario, and what you will want to do is have that as aligned as possible. So with one few clicks, what we want to do is get from this scenario into a next scenario that we have an absolute perfect alignment. And this, you will agree with me, that is going to give us a much better starting point. Okay, there is always as well the point that it should be raised. It takes us a little bit of the point of the automatic analysis, but I think that this has to be mentioned, and is always checking the integrity of your fragment library. This can be as well very easily automated. There are batch tools that we can provide that will allow you to check for thousands or tens of thousands of fragments, both in the quantitative level, so saying if the concentration of your fragments is the one that is supposed to be, and if your fragments are really present or not. We can do this either by NMR or by mass spec. And in this sense, we will end up with automated analysis, like in this particular scenario, that we can see that our fragment would be present in solution, not as pure as maybe we would like, and we will end up with a full report saying which fragments are present and which fragments are not. This in particular case, this particular example, it would be just using LCMS data, which for some of you may be more convenient. Okay, so moving into acquisition, there are several things that are worth mentioning. The first one, I'm sorry if this is too obvious, is please spend our time getting your solvent suppression as neat and as good as possible. It will help you considerably. This is one of the cases that I really love the work that these guys have done, and you barely can see it. I'm sure that we can start here a competition to see who gets the minimum, the smallest residual solvent peak from the suppression. Also, allow enough repetitions. We are under constraint for instrument time, but sometimes not having enough of signal to noise is really not going to help your case. Whether you are going to do this automatically or whether you are going to be doing this in a fully manual way. Next, and I'm sorry to have to repeat this, to say this, but I have seen by now so many times this problem that I think it should be mentioned. Please keep the same receiver gain if you can. Mostly this is critical for receiver gain, for fluorine 19. In this particular scenario, we really don't have much hooks. Usually we don't have any signal that we can use that is present in every single sample. So if the receiver gain is not the same, then we are going to have serious problems trying to quantitate. Either way, quantitate manually or quantitate automatically. Okay, moving more into the arena that it would concern more the post-acquisition area. There are several considerations that must be done for reprocessing. First of all, I always recommend huge batch tools. There are ways, we will go them briefly over them later on, that you can bring in hundreds of thousands of the spectra and just check that your reprocessing conditions are optimal for each one of your samples. This is absolutely critical. Most of us tend to mostly ignore the first one and pay a little bit more of attention to the second one, but both of them are really critical if we want to have good quantitation. And at the end of the day, that is the game that we are playing. We are looking at changes in signal integral between one sample and the other. If we don't have good baseline, we don't have good phase correction, then those results shouldn't be really be trusted. Now, we will see this later. I will remind you guys a few more times. Use reprocessing templates. This is going to help your case tremendously. It's going to save you a lot of time, and also is going to ensure that you are being consistent. And at the end of the day, this is kind of the scenario that we would like to look at. We are talking about, in this particular scenario, we are looking at over close to 60 spectra, and all of them are mixtures, and we would like to have it as homogeneous as possible. We see that we achieve a high degree of good phase and baseline in all and each one of the samples. This requires a little bit of playing, but we will see later when we jump into the software more how to get to these states and how to get to this point. Okay, now just starting the points about analysis. There is one thing that we have to be aware of, and is that computers can only look what we tell them to look at. And we can only make them as clever as the technology allows. So in this sense, it's always worth spending some time initially with your data and setting up the tolerances. We will see this later on the practical session. The tolerances as how much we are going to allow the software to go either one way or the other looking for peaks. Obviously, this has two sides. If we are too stringent and that value is too small, then chances are that since we are changing experimental conditions from sample to sample in terms of buffer conditions and sometimes even sunlight power, our signals, whether we like it or not, are going to drift. And even performing alignment, it will not make that drifting something that we can avoid. So in this sense, we want to have a good compromise value that is, like I was saying, neither too small nor too big. Too small of values, we may end up having an excessive number of false negatives. If we increase the value too much, we may end up on the other side and having too many false positives. And obviously, the range of values that we are looking at for proton, which tends to be on the region of something like 4 to 6 hertz, maximum 10, maximum 7 hertz. This for fluorine, it gets increased by almost 5-fold. So there are values in there. Oops, sorry. Martin was asking some questions. Yes, well, sorry, I forgot to say that. We'll have a Q&A at the end of the session, guys. So remember this when you are switching from proton to fluorine. We'll see, like I was saying, a few samples later on. Okay, so in this sense, the one thing that I mentioned that I really don't want to get into at all, and hence I'm not going to, is that for each different system, each different target, protein family, there is going to be different consideration on what we are going to be calling to be a hit. The only the compromise that we came to is that we are going to allow you to define by yourself what you consider or when you would consider that a hit is a hit. And that is by far the best approach from our point of view. You can change it, and you can also iterate all over these signals. Okay, we will see more in a little bit about the particularities of analysis and processing parameters. In that sense, there is the point of how to automate the analysis, and this can be broken into 5 discrete pieces. That is data mapping, alignment of the data, normalization of that data if possible, the convolution of the peaks, and last but not least, the matching. These all 5 points, we'll see them in a little bit more of detail in the following slides. And the last thing, or our last step, it would be get all those results and produce a report with all those results. This type of reports will come in 2 different ways. It will come in a visual inspection, and as we will see later on, it will come as well into what we can call a report in an Excel format that we can play on with more later on. Okay, this is as far as I want to go with the introduction with PowerPoint. It is nonetheless, there are people who I would like to thank. Some of them, you guys know them. Some of them have been working in the shadows. Chen and I have been having lots of arguments about sometimes philosophical questions, sometimes very pragmatic questions, and he's helped a lot in the design of Screen. Agustin is the brain behind all the coding. Very talented and also very original computational solutions, the ones that he has offered. There is people who started, and I cannot mention, sorry, I cannot not mention all of them, but this project originally was started at Pfizer. In MoveOn, Novartis, Lily and Medivir help a lot with suggestions and also financial support. Also, both Terry and Ben have offered a lot of insight in what how we should be carrying on the analysis, and how should be looking at our results, and how we should be reporting them. And also thank to all of you guys for the attention. And now let's play with it. Let's see how it looks. Like I was saying, we will have the Q&A session later on after the practical session. Okay, so once you install Screen, you will find yourself that is under the advanced menu. It's going to be broken into 3 distinctive pieces: analysis for proton, for fluorine, and what we saw in the last slide, the result viewer. Now, I mentioned there are many batch tools that are going to help you bring in data and reprocess all that data. So before jumping into a Screen, all those batch tools, for most of you, well, should be for all of you, you will be able to open hundreds, thousands of spectra, either using the multi-open script by going into scripts, import, multi-open, and in here what we can do is, using a series of file masks, we can bring in as much data as we would like. So in this case, I was looking this morning at some fluorine data. So what we can do is just a simple act of clicking. We're going to open all of those data sets. The thing is, I'm going to select all of those data sets, and I'm going to stack them. Now, the beauty of all this is that I'm going to be able to apply reprocessing operations to the entire data set. Hence, I'm going to be able to find those reprocessing parameters which are going to give me the best results in terms of phase, in terms of maybe even alignment, and in terms of also of baseline correction. So once we have all our data sets in here, we can start playing with them. We can start playing with the conditions for phase correction. We can also start playing with our optimum for baseline correction. I have my personal favorites, and in the case usually of proton NMR, I would say use a combination of global metabolomics and whitening. For the case of fluorine, for most cases, either global or whitening, it will be more than enough. The same, I can tell you a little bit my favorites for baseline correction. In this case, for the cases of proton NMR, I would usually go for a polynomial fit, and I will play with polynomials orders of 5 to 7. And for fluorine 19, I will play with Whittaker smoother. Just one very quick point in here. Please, if you are going to use Whittaker smoother for proton NMR, please be very careful. Whittaker smoother is a very dramatic baseline correction. Hence, there is a chance that you will wipe out some of your signal in proton NMR. So be very careful. You will have absolutely beautiful baseline, but you will wipe out some of the Lorentzian signal from your NMR. Okay, so once we are happy with all our reprocessing parameters, in this case, for example, I would play a little bit as well with the apodization function. I may, for the case of fluorine, I may go a little bit crazy, and I may decide to increase the exponential weight to 2 Hertz. But the point is that once I have all of this, the only thing that I need to do is go into my processing menu, select my processing template, and with these operations, just save them into a location from which I will be able to retrieve them later. This is going to be absolutely critical, like I mentioned before. If your phase is all over the place, if your baseline is all over the place, then there is not going to be a way that we can automate the screening at all. Okay, so next, after we are happy with our processing conditions, we are going to go start playing with our data mapping. So the first window that will appear in front of you, our first of tabs, this is no more and no less just for record keeping. It's going to allow you just to say where you want your results to be saved and where you would like to include certain data in there for archiving later on. After this, the first thing that we need to start doing is we need to start mapping where the data is. And this is one of the steps that, thinking ahead, it will help you considerably in automating the analysis. There are many different approaches at mapping the data that we have right now implemented into Nostra, and I really don't want to spend a lot of time in here. Pretty much because since we started the coding of the project, so many different people had saved their data in so many different ways, which is only natural, that we went through many different iterations to make this system as flexible as possible. Just to say, it is one point that I would like to make is get yourself familiarized with the file mask system. This is, you will find definitions of it when you hover over it. Just very briefly to say that you can combine things like question marks for saying or demarking any number of characters. You can use wildcards. So this would mean that go to this directory, open every single folder that you find in there, and within those folders, please only open experiments 1, 2, and 3, and open the FIDs for each one of those experiments. Now, we have another example at the bottom in here. It would be go to this specific directory, open every single folder, and within that folder, only open those experiments that have 2 digits. I don't care which 2 digits are in there. 1, 0, A, B, I don't care. Anything that only has 2 digits. So in this case, we avoid opening, for example, anything that that goes from 0 to 9. We will open anything from 10 all the way to 99. Now, once that has happened, Mestre Nova, MS Screen, will say, okay, I can match and I can see that within any of these particular folders, I have these references. So what we can see in here is that it matches each one of those experiments with its corresponding references. This is done for several reasons. You can run without references as well if you decide to do so. The only thing is that then we cannot check, obviously, for the integrity of the samples. By integrity, I mean if your that specific fragment has gone into solution or not. Okay, once we have done that, we have to tell MS Screen what is on each one, or what type of experiment is the one present on each one of those wells or of those samples, and this, just by clicking, we can go through each one of them. Oops. It didn't like the water loxy. I cannot blame it. I always struggle with water loxy as well. Okay. Once we have indicated what type of experiment we have present in there, what we need, next thing that we need to do is indicate the contents. The nomenclature in here is, you can call it either blank or your scout, your sample with protein, and last but not least, the sample with the protein and a selective inhibitor or a competitor for the target that you are investigating. Now, the last thing I would like to say in here is that this can be made much more efficient. For example, you can have lookup files, so you can have a CSV file in which you tell us where all your directories are. So on and so forth. Honestly, guys, this has become very, very flexible, so there are many ways in which you will be able to map your data. Okay, with this being said, now we're going into the nitty-gritty. That is going to be our reprocessing settings. So what are we going to need to do? Like I mentioned before, we are going to need to align. We are going to need to perform a normalization step. And last but not least, we are going to have to apply our baseline phase correction, the specific apodization function that I want to use for this. If I wanted to apply linear prediction, if I wanted to apply, for example, a blind region, I would be more than capable of doing so through the processing template. So remember that. Now, obviously, we are going to be needing this for everything. We are going to be needing this for our references, for each one of our particular experiments, and for each one of the experiments that I will be looking at. So in this case, we are only looking to T1 row type experiments, but if I had in here any other experiments like STDs, like water lopses, this would be get populated for me. On the same manner, we will have that for, like I was mentioning, for our references, and we will need to use that for references as well. Now, there is one thing that I mentioned before, and this is when we would like MS Screen to call something a hit. And this is for you to set up. This is not something that I really feel comfortable giving you any recommendations, because the variations are going to be way too big across type of experiments and across types of systems. So the only thing that I can say in here is plenty of papers out there, and also experience and play with it. Okay, now there is a series, something that I didn't mention before, and it is when are we going to consider that a sample or one particular fragment, it's better if we talk about fragments in this case, if one particular fragment has gone into solution or not. I mean, for most of you who've been doing this quite a lot and you have curated your libraries, chances are that this is not going to happen very often, if at all, that something doesn't dissolve. For those of you starting, this is going to help you precisely to do that, to start curating your library, to detect when a fragment hasn't gone into solution. But you need to tell us which are the values that you are happy with. For example, in my case, usually since this screening that I was doing, some of the fragments didn't have that many peaks, then I lowered my threshold to the minimum to a 10%. You cannot make it any smaller than that. So if something has less than 10%, we can detect less than 10% of the peaks in solution in our mixture, then we call that sample as being not present, or as being missing. The other aspect that I mentioned before, it was that we need to give some kind of tolerance for matching peaks. We can try to make things very clever, things very much more automated. We found out that in this case, just a direct peak matching, it would work for most cases. So we just kept it simple. The only thing that we need to do is just become familiarized a little bit with which are the right values for our screen. Like I showed on my slide before, you really can have a good feeling for this particular value just by stacking all of your data sets and looking to the maximum variations that you would have in there and getting a bit of a compromise of a value. Okay, one of the options that I just wanted to very briefly comment is that in many cases, what you can see in here, we acquired, first of all, this would be a normal proton. We acquired a T1-row experiment, and we are using the T1-row experiment as if it was our scout. So we need to tell the software that we would like to use that first T1-row experiment to look for missing fragments and to match those fragments to that particular experiment. Last but not least, in our setting screen, is the regions that we are going to be looking at. It is really critical that you avoid regions, like it could be, you can see in here that I avoided, I've gone almost half a ppm over what it would be the end of my water suppressed region. If you don't go and if you don't do that, you are going, any signal that is around that region is going to be heavily distorted, and it's just going to give you a little bit of a headache. On the same manner, for this particular set, there was a lot of bumpiness around the region of 2.5 to 4 ppm. So pretty much there were no signals left on the aliphatic region. So we just focus on the region corresponding to aromatics and exchangeables. Okay. Now, there is one thing that it will give you a little bit quality of life that is worth mentioning, and is that everything that we have set up, everything that we have done in here, we kind of have collected it while you were doing it, and we have created a live report. So what you can see in here is that we are displaying, like we can see in here, our limits is from 6 to 13 ppm. So every time that you change something in here, we are going to include it in the report. The idea is that when you write this up and you report this, you just can copy your report and just paste it somewhere in your ELN or somewhere in order to save you a ton of time. Okay, so in this particular scenario, we would be perfectly ready to hit go, and that's exactly what we are going to do. Actually, this is worth mentioning. Remember, once you have set all this up, please save your parameters. The last thing that you want to do is whatever it may happen, our software never crashes, but you never know. So you can save these parameters and then head to make sure that is saved on a safe place, so you can later on recall them. Okay, so we are just going to hit go. The software is going to go through all of those data sets and is going to start the peak picking, the phase correction, and the analysis for each one of those. So in this particular set that I'm using right now, I think we have 5 different pools. So we are going, and on each pool we have 12 fragments, I think. So we are looking right now to over 70 spectra, and these are the results for each one of them. Now, we have kind of an overview of what the results would be for these specific samples, but we also have, well, like I mentioned before, we have our viewer in front of us. From this viewer, what we can do is we can go sample by sample, and every time we double click on one of these, that is going to be open for us. Now, in here, I'm going to be able to display only the information that I'm more interested on. So in this case, let's go step by step. So the first thing that we can see is that some of the samples have been labeled as missing. Okay, just one point of clarification in here. The fact that it's labeled as missing, what it means is that on the region that we have marked as our region of interest, we can find no signals. This doesn't mean, obviously, as you can infer, that the sample hasn't dissolved, just that the sample has no representative peaks on that region. If we want to have a full visual inspection, what you can do is we perform a cutting operation, so you can go and look only to the region that we are most interested on. If you want to restore all the regions, what you can do is just go to the cut tool and hit restore all. And in here, we can clearly see that all the signals for that specific fragment, well, actually, I would argue the first one pretty much has got nothing, but for the second one, all of the signals of interest are pretty much on the aliphatic region. And again, I would argue that most of that is going to be buffered. But, well, let's say that we have a little bit lying around the 4 ppm region. Okay, so in our particular case, we are not interested on that region at all. Like I was saying, we are just looking to 6 to 12 ppm region. The samples, and this is worth mentioning because sometimes it gives place to some confusion. We just call present samples that, or those fragments that pretty much we haven't been able to detect any changes or on any interactions in our particular case within the T1 row experiments. And at the end of the day, what we would be interested on are our hits, or we will look at them in a bit, our non-selective hits. Now, the visualization tools that we have for MesterNova really help the case. What I tend to do, I tend to use a combination of two functions. I tend to use, if I right-click on my toolbar and I go into the stack spectra table, the stack spectra table has really nice features. One of the nicest ones that I failed to mention when we were looking at stacks is that if you select and you pin one sample, all the changes that you will make over that stack will only affect that sample. That can be critical if you are making a visual inspection and you are not happy with one particular sample and you would like to just face that sample and make baseline correction on that sample. So bear that in mind. This will save you a ton of time. But for this particular scenario, like I was saying, I use a two combination action. It's going to be through my stack table, and the second thing that I'm going to do is superimpose my spectra. And now I can start looking to what is going on in here. You will see that even though I perform an alignment step, things sometimes, and this is experimental life, don't go according to plan, and I still would have a little bit of leeway in there. But what I'm more interested in on this case, that it would be my 3 T1 row experiments. Let's start from here. My 3 T1 row experiments are pretty much, let's zoom in even a little bit more, are beautifully aligned. I mean, you can see in here, well, my protein experiment is a little bit out, but that's within our limits. We can check that very quickly. So that's going to be in the 2 Hertz region. I think we set up all the way to 2.5 multiplied by line width, so we are going over 3 Hertz region, so we should be absolutely fine. Oops. Okay, but what we are more interested on is looking specifically and now making a quick visual inspection. So what we are looking at is we are looking first to our blank or scout. We are looking then to the changes on the protein, and I mean, remember this has already been normalized. This is quite a dramatic change, and also when we go back to when we add a competitor, we can see full recovery of the intensity or the integral. So I would be more than happy with this particular result. This is just if you see something that catches your eye, or if you are thinking of doing this in a more manual manner. Okay. So what else can we do with this? So now that I have looked, allow me to move this out of the way. Now that I've looked to my first sample, what I tend to do is just I tick it. So I know this is nice because I have a very small set, but imagine that I have several hundreds in here. So this is just to kind of go and record what you have been doing with each one of them. Now we could go to any other of the sets, and I can start looking to some of the data sets and see exactly why in this particular case, for example, this guy has been labeled as being a non-selective or non-specific hit. I'm not going to discuss semantics in here. I had so many opinions about how we should be calling this that by now I think it's going to stay as a non-selective hit. Okay, so what we would have in here is that for our particular peak, we go, that would be my scout experiment. And then I see attenuation with my protein, but then it doesn't fully recover. Remember, what I said this when I said this would be it needs to recover over 25% in order to be considered. Sorry, over 25% of the intensity of our protein of our scout signal in order to be considered like it has fully recovered. Otherwise, we are going to be labeling it as a non-selective hit. Now, I know what many of you will say, of saying, okay, that doesn't fit my criteria, and for my particular case, I would consider this to be a hit. And that's absolutely fine. We agree with you that may be called as such. So the only thing that you will need in this particular case is just double-click in that particular sample, and we have changed that from a non-selective hit to a specific hit. And you're more than welcome to do this. No problems whatsoever. Okay, so everything that the software that Mestre Nova has been doing, we have tried to capture it coming this point. So as you may understand, there are a lot of things that have been happening. There is a lot of analysis, very verbose, that has been happening on the background. We try to give you a brief report on the comments. On the comments, this is going to, for each one of your fragments, we're going to be telling you what peaks we have used for the analysis. And this is especially relevant. If you remember from the presentation, one of the steps that we are doing is at the convolution step. The convolution is fantastic, but the convolution, what it has is that it performs a peak picking almost on every single peak of the spectra coming to noise level. That can be tweaked, but is extremely sensitive. So in some occasions, it may happen that we are peak picking signals that are coming close to the threshold that you have established as being something that you are not interested on. But that's something we have to live with. Now, this would be a first layer. The second layer that we are creating is, if you allow me to go into, oops, not to zombie monster. We can go, actually I can do this I can do this quicker. I just want to go to my results. And this will be the last one that we have run. So all this has been saved into a log file. This log file has, is very verbose. It has a lot of information, but at the end of the day, it will have some of the information that you, in some occasions, you may want to have available. This is not only here, but I like to show people what things and how things are happening. This is not only here, but most of that information, we also have it on our CSV file. On this CSV file, we have everything, and we contrast everything that has been happening with allow me to go a little bit more, with the viewer and with the CSV report. So you will see in a few minutes what I mean with the CSV report, but in this particular case, I would like, for example, would like to look at match proportions. So you can, from the more qualitative view that we had before, that just calling a hit, you can browse through different types of metrics, like it could be a match proportion, or more interestingly, my average intensity changes. So in here, I can look, and the result, the value that we are using to display the results is the average one, but in some occasions, I may want to combine the average one with the maximum intensity. And in some cases, I may want to go and look to some of these guys. For example, I have a maximum intensity change in here of 42%, but the average change is not close to that. But I could go and look if that is, for example, something that is borderline. In this case, you can see that it's not. So it's only one of my peaks that is changing quite considerably on that particular pool. Now, this can be done obviously very easily with a few samples. If we are looking at making that type of analysis, then for hundreds of pools, then we may be better on looking to a specific, and what I'm going to do is export all my results, and I'm going to be just using, so it's not too crowded, I'm just going to be using my T1 raw results, and what I'm going to be doing here is just exporting this. And in this case, I'm just exporting it to Excel. So what this is going to allow me, for example, is to make a bit more and to play a little bit more with statistics and do a little bit more of a game of numbers. Okay, this is as far as Proton is concerned. As far as Fluorine is concerned, we are effectively talking the same. There is only one thing before opening for Q&A that I would like to mention for Fluorine. It was mentioned before, but I would like to stress it. And this is that for Fluorine, since on many occasions we didn't have any helpers, any hooks to perform an alignment, we did a lot of testing, and we found out that by using global alignment, we were getting things to the place where we were happy with it. For Fluorine, so my recommendation is do give it a shot if you are doing Fluorine campaigns. Do give it a shot, play with the global alignment with Fluorine, and tell us what you think. But with Fluorine, it would be exactly the same. We would just set up our analysis, fire it to go. Same considerations in here. We are using the global alignment. We are using phase and baseline correction reprocessing templates. And I'm going to end up with my results in here, in which same considerations that we made about the qualitative representation of the results as present, missing, non-selecting, and specific hit are applicable. And we can carry on and look to each one to see which one is missing. If it's really, obviously, for Fluorine it's kind of easier So we can see in here that our one missing one. And in this scenario, I think I'm going through the entire, oops, I didn't mean to do that. For the entire of the spectral width, we would have, for that particular case, we would have our that proton we were looking at, it would be the one that it is actually missing. Oops. Okay, there we go. So with all this being said, guys, I'm going to close the session and open for Q&A. So this is going to be more moderated by Oli. I think that since we have quite a few people around, it's better if you type in, or whoever wants to speak, just please raise your hand. Nope, someone is asking me on Skype. Okay. Okay, Martin, I thought you said you had a question. I know it's way too late for you guys in Australia, so I don't know if you are still awake. I think Don June has a question as well. Okay, let me see if I can check the... okay, Martin, so the answer is no. You don't need a competitor at all to perform the analysis. You just leave that. That is totally optional. It's not something that you are going to have to make, or we are going to make. We're making it compulsory for you. So short answer, no, you don't need it. Okay, any more questions, guys? Okay, fantastic. Like I said, you have my contact details. You have the contact details from Olaya, who's been writing to some of you. So the only thing that I can say, okay, sorry, Martin said everyone. Okay. Let me think this for 1 second, Martin. So Martin is asking if with the matching, if we can do this the other way around. So we are looking for situations where the mixture spectrum has changed. Yeah, I don't see why not. Personally, I haven't tried to do it, but at the end of the day, that is what we are doing it. The only thing that at this stage it would happen is we will tell you only which parts, obviously, of the spectrum have changed. But I don't see why not. I mean, are you thinking more in a case of a principal component analysis, more along those lines? Okay, so you're looking more at stability. In principle, I don't see why not. But this is a bit of a rush answer from my side. I would like to sit in front of the data and look exactly how to do it properly. But that's a good question. More questions around the globe, guys? Yes, absolutely. Martin, let's take it offline and we can talk more specifics. Okay, don't be shy, guys. This is your chance now. If you would like to make any questions, so go for it. Okay. Okay, so thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much for the questions. Following on, like I said, please, if you have any burning issues or do you have any additional questions when all the information settles in, make one of us know, and we will make our best in order to answer them. This is all for now. Again, thank you very much for attending, and thank you very much for being here. Take care now. Everyone have a good day or a good night. Bye now.